Hey guys, so I made a circular knitting needle organizer and I promised some of you that I would show it to you. So here's what it looks like. Sorry for all the needle noise that you might be hearing, but yeah, this is what it looks like. It's pretty simple and perfect. Actually, it is completely perfect for what I needed it for. This is what it looks like up close. So essentially what I did is I took the mustard colored fabric, which is the background color, and I measured it out. I'm not exactly sure how long. If you really want like specific details, I can write them down for you. But essentially what I did is I took a piece of fabric and I decided, all right, this is about how long I want it to be, and I ironed it and then I sewed it inside out so that I created kind of a long pillowcase. I turned it back to the right side and I repeated that step with the second color. And the second color is a little bit thinner and shorter than the mustard. So if you can see that, there's some space here and there's also some space at the top. I'm just trying to hide the ugly hanger that it's using. So the reason that I did the second color a little bit smaller is that I wanted some room on the top to hang it from. And I will be doing kind of a wooden dowel rod or a stick or something instead of a hanger eventually. And at the bottom I wanted some room so that the needles that are shorter, like the circular needles that are not like 24 inches or longer, the ones that don't dangle very much weren't going to be just rubbing against the wall, that they had a little bit of fabric to rub against so it wouldn't be quite as noisy or leave as much of a mark or anything like that. And I just think it looks a little better. It keeps the symmetry a little bit between the top and the bottom. And I left some room on the edges so that the same reason that the needles wouldn't clang against the wall, that they would have some fabric to hit up against instead. And so then once I made those basically two giant pockets or two pillowcases, whatever you want to call them, and I did that just so that I wouldn't have any raw fringed edges. If you're a much better sewer than I am, then you could probably find a more creative way to do it than that. But I know almost nothing about sewing, so this is how I did it. So what I did is I measured out how many different sizes of needles I would be using, and I forget if it's like 16 or something. I wanted to leave room at the higher end of the needles in case I decided down the line that I wanted to start working with larger needles, then I would have room. So what I did is, starting at the top here, I made a seam, and I seamed just a little bit over into both ends of the other color fabric. So I just backstitched a little bit and then went across and did a little bit over so that it firmly secures it. And then I went down about 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches and did another seam doing the same thing, and that leaves a pocket. So for example, you can just fit a needle in there, and that's how that works. So there's a little bit of a pocket, and I made it large enough for larger size needles and so that you could have several of each size. And then I just kept going down, you know, like 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches and doing a line and doing a line. And I did that all the way down, and then I finally sewed the last seam to match the top one, so it's at the very edge, at the very bottom. So it just gave me like, I think 16 little pockets, but you could do the math and figure out how many would work for you and figure out how wide it needs to be for you. 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches is what worked out for me, but you could do your own math and figure out what works for you. Yeah, very kind of poorly made because I'm not a sewer, but my mom was watching over on our date night, making sure that I didn't fully screw it up, and I seemed to put the fabric in the wrong direction so that I would have to backstitch across the whole thing instead, so I kept messing it up, but it works, and it looks decent to good. I like it, but don't look too closely if you're, you know, a good sewer because you'll catch all my mistakes. So what I did to keep a straight line is that I took a piece of paper and I folded it in half, and I would sew one of the straight edges, or I'm sorry, I would pin one of the straight edges here. So the other edge would be a straight line across here. So it'd be kind of an L shape. So that's what worked for me. I'm sure there's probably a better way to do it, or maybe a sewing tool that does that, but that's what worked for me. And that way I didn't have to do any kind of line drawing or little dash marks or anything. And then I just kind of tucked in the little bits of the case that I made and sewed those closed. And I will be stitching in by hand the sizes that each pocket is, but for now I just count from 0 all the way up for if I need to find a needle size quickly. So it works really well for me and I like it a lot. I can definitely recommend it. Beforehand, my knitting needles were scattered all over the floor and everywhere, and at the moment, and probably forever, I think I will only be using circular needles. So the ChiaoGoo red lace needles that are fixed are my absolute favorite. I use them for every project and I probably will for a very long time. So I'm just kind of accumulating at least one of every size and many different cord lengths. I prefer the fixed to the interchangeable for many reasons. So for me, this works very well. I've seen a lot of roll cases that people make for straight knitting needles, and while that's a really great idea, this works the best for me when trying to organize my circular knitting needles. That's just a very basic overview kind of recipe for how I made this for those of you that were interested. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.